Today, I want to show a few pages and make a few comments on a book that was made possible for the History Room by Tim and Joan Sen here of Bloomington. They noticed that it was available for purchase. The 50th anniversary, Bloomington and Blake's Prairie Congregational Churches, 1847 to 1897. And I read through the book there. I think it's very interesting. We'll probably try to also get it copied because it's getting to the point where, you know, just from age, it's going to want to maybe kind of separate after a while. But it's still in quite good condition. The pictures are good. And we'll be looking at 4 of them, plus there's lots of pictures of pastors, but we won't look at all those. So I'll be going through here and pointing out some things. Here we have a picture that was taken at the 50th anniversary celebration. So they had a goodly number then. We have to remember back in those days, farms were smaller, families were larger, so you did have a lot of people, and there was much interest in different types of churches and schools. Anything along that line there was the interest available. Now the next one I thought was very interesting. I had heard this mentioned before. Pap Blunt's barn. Hard to imagine that was used as a church here at first. So that was used as a church. And I know it's been mentioned in other things when I've gone through some different history books. So it was a well-known place, so church was not too fancy to begin with, as you can see. Now on this page here, I'll try to hold down the page. Now the names won't look very familiar other than the last name of Garside, but these would be the charter members of the church, the first members. Later I'll be mentioning some of the names of people who wrote some of the articles and that are mentioned later on that you will recognize the last names. And here we have a picture of the church. Blake's Prairie Church. Turned out pretty good and has stayed in good condition. Now I might mention that this book was compiled or put together by the articles written by different people by the Reverend R.L. Cheney. And the book itself is 114 pages long, so it gives you a good idea of what it was like in those early days and the interest. One thing I thought that was very unique when I even went back to check, did I write that down right? Lard lamps. In other words, lamps that use lard as a fuel to provide the light. Lard lamps. I know you hear a lot more recent times, well, how is that pie crust so flaky? Well, lard was used, and so lard came in handy there in providing light there for a period of time. I thought that was quite interesting. Now in 1855, the church on the hill was built, and in 1872, 73, in that time period, That was moved. Now, it seems like I've seen two different mileages mentioned. One was about 4 miles, another one said about 6 miles. But it did get moved out further there in the prairie or to the west. And so it did have another use. And another thing that was interesting about the Sunday schools, and a lot of times they made use of school buildings. A couple that were mentioned was the Red Schoolhouse. That's one of the famous ones that we have covered before in some of our history programs. Curtis Schoolhouse was mentioned. And so we had a number like this where the Sunday schools were held. Now, some of the names mentioned here for writing some of the different chapters, we have Matthew McIver, and I know sometimes when I was looking in some Glen Haven history for a particular reason one day, and I noticed McIver names showed up different times there in Glen Haven Township. There's also a Miss N. J. McIver mentioned. There's Mrs. Minnie Glazier mentioned. There's a Mrs. Bartley mentioned. There's a Roxy Critchlow. So some of these names later on here, a little more familiar. We still hear some of those names mentioned. And one of the charter members that probably was quite important for quite a long period of time was Hugh Garside. Hugh Garside. And I know the Garside name I've heard mentioned one way or another, a family name mentioned in some of the history things I've seen. Now it got to the point where finally the churches were combined in Bloomington, so they went together and they purchased the old Academy building in Bloomington was used for the church. Now, one thing I'd like to mention here, when I came to town, Congress Street was usually referred to as Church Street. Now, there was a particular reason for that because at one time there were 4 churches and they were all located on Congress Street, and which became known as Church Street for most people. And we had the Baptist Church, the original one that ended up down along Mill Street there in later days, and towards the end it was a storage building there for Hermsons before that got torn down. The newer Baptist Church has been for a number of years used as an apartment building there along Congress Street, located there on the corner. The Congregational Church, of course, was still in existence when I came to town. I remember when they had an auction there, and the stained glass windows those were always popular for auctions. And then, of course, the Congregational Church in different places that joined in later with the United Methodist Church. So now we're down to just the Methodist Church and the Catholic Church now in Bloomington. Of course, maybe I didn't mention there was also the Catholic Church too. That was formed in 1899, the original one, and then in the 1940s, the current Catholic Church was built. So that gives you a little idea of some of the things covered there, because a lot of times it's mentioned real early on about the church on the hill. So it gives you a little idea of what it was like, and book will be available, but we'll try to also get a copy made there because like I say, it will start probably separating in the pages, but The print is good, the pictures are good, and it really gives us a good idea of more about our early foundation. We need to know that, whether it's involved with schools or churches, whatever, it is important. And when you study about what happened to great civilizations in the past, we need to remember, sure, there was an outside enemy that maybe came in, but the original problem was internal decay, when things were starting to fall apart. In other words, the so-called foundation that we built on was starting to deteriorate. We weren't taking care of it maybe in the past. So those are always important things to remember. Why we spend time learning about some of these things, because that's part of our foundation that we need to maintain to keep going for the future. No matter what our beliefs might be, we need to know why people came here and why things were built along churches, schools, homes, farms, why that was all done. So this gives you a little idea there about this book, and it's just another one of our interesting editions, and we keep getting more things. Keep us in mind whenever you have anything older, wondering what to do with, let us know. We might be interested in it. Again, thank you for watching our program.